We saved the very best for last. My name is Alex Batlin. I work for BNY Mellon. I head up the blockchain practice. And with me, I've got some incredible individuals to tell you all about the technical working group, the most important group for Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, because this is where the spec is going to come out. So I'll ask the team here to introduce themselves very quickly, their name, their role, and then we'll kick off with some questions.
It's okay. I'm Ari Jules. I'm a faculty member at Cornell Tech, which is a new Cornell and Technion campus being constructed in New York City, opening in 2 months, actually. I'm also a co-director of IC3, the Initiative for Cryptocurrencies and Contracts, which is based at the Jacobs Institute at Cornell Tech, but includes a number of universities, Cornell and Cornell Tech primary among them, but also UIUC and the Technion and Berkeley. And we're currently the largest academic research initiative devoted to all things blockchain.
It's people like him that make me feel dumb, but never mind, let's move on. So, Bob.
Hello, everyone. My name's Bob Summerwill. I work for Consensus. I was formerly at the Ethereum Foundation, and I am the secretary of the technical working group as well, and generally social glue.
Thank you very much. Ramesh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ramesh Babu. I work for a technology consulting company, Wipro Technologies. I head the practice for blockchain and analytics. Wipro is, again, a launch member for Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We do a lot of work around enterprise customers, especially on blockchain. Happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sanjay Bakshi from Intel. I'm a principal engineer there. I have been focused a lot on hardware-based security, using hardware to secure things, specifically looking at identity, payments, privacy, and all those kinds of things. So we're looking at those kinds of tools and see how we can basically work with blockchains to basically help with the privacy, scalability, and things like that using hardware. Glad to be here.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I think the microphone works, so if I shout enough, we should get there. So one of the things that people often ask, especially in the early days of Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, is, well, why do we need it? What is it that we're trying to achieve, and what is Ethereum Foundation not giving us, and therefore requires something like the Alliance? So I think this is really just to set us up to then answer a bunch of other questions as to where we're going to go. Any thoughts, Sanjay, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's a great question to start with, Alex. Ethereum Foundation and Ethereum Assets has been there for a long time, so it's not that this alliance came out of thin air, first off. And then when we do, the way we work in enterprises, like you look at the projects that got cooked up out of Ethereum, it's just more of the POCs, and there definitely needs to be a push that needs, and also there's need to be a legal entity because enterprises are more concerned about that. And having an Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and the kind of sub-working groups which are focused on certain initiatives that enterprises are looking at, could be identity, it could be scalability, resilience, and what or not. So all of those things are essential. I think there's a great first step forward. This gives a vision to and a roadmap to and a spec that people will be adhering to. I would say this is more like an ISO for blockchains, actually.
Awesome. Anybody else? And specifically, why not Ethereum Foundation?
Yeah, the thing is, the way I view it is like public versus private internet. Both are needed and have different requirements. And nice thing here is, like, with the public side of the foundation, we started off on the, I would say, more difficult problem because it's more unregulated, more open. But then as we go into the enterprise, having deployed applications for both enterprise and consumers at Intel, enterprises have lots of regulatory requirements and things like that. So it needs a little bit more focus on those kinds of this, like, auditing and all of that stuff, and, sharing of data and things like that. So it needs that kind of a focus little bit in terms of, like, getting into those requirements. Yeah.
Any other comments, guys?
Yeah, I would just add that one fundamental technical difference I see is the emphasis in EEA on permission blockchains, right? And this is something Alex and I were discussing before the panel. One of the main differences is that the consensus algorithms are most appropriate for permission blockchains are entirely different from those suitable for permissionless blockchains, although there may be some convergence in the future. So the technical foundations are quite different. And other things look different as well in a permissioned world. The trust model is different. The way that one would craft oracles is different. The requirements for confidentiality are different, perhaps more rigorous in some cases. So I do see a fundamental technical difference between the two endeavors.
And Bob, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, they're complementary activities really, and I'd say the essential thing is that the Ethereum Foundation was was set up to build the public network, and enterprise needs are a superset of that, and it makes sense to work together on building those pieces. The hope is that those roadmaps will converge over time. They'll be complementary, but it's different work essentially.
Cool. So we've got effectively two different atmospheres, nitrogen and oxygen, and therefore you have to develop tools that operate in slightly different atmospheres. I think that's pretty clear. So what are the kind of challenges that we specifically want to address? So each one of you obviously joined the consortia. You must be able to, or alliance, and you must be wanting to push one or two things that are particularly important to you guys. So I'd love to hear what you think is kind of the one or two top priorities that you'd like to see being spec'd out for this year.
Well, our research program in IC3 is guided by a collection of what we refer to as our 5 grand challenges, and all of them are applicable to the EEA setting. One of them is scaling, an obvious need. Another is correctness. If we're going to use smart contracts, we want to make sure, of course, that they function as intended. Another is confidentiality. This is absolutely critical. Today, as you know, and this is the approach taken in Quorum, for instance, confidential data are basically sequestered from the blockchain. This is a very good mechanism for ensuring privacy, but it means that you're not really reaping the full benefit of the blockchain. If you're not placing data, at least in encrypted form, on the blockchain, then you're losing accountability and the ability to do on-chain settlement in the purest sense, and so on and so forth. So that's another requirement. Yet another is reliable data feeds, trustworthy data feeds. And finally, while correctness is very important, it's essentially an unattainable goal. So we need to consider the possibility that things will go wrong. We need to build escape hatches into our smart contracts. We need to have good remediation mechanisms. And that, too, is a major challenge and an extremely important one.
Doesn't that kind of contradict a little bit coder's law and all that kind of ethics?
Contradict in what sense?
Well, if you've got escape hatches, a regulator can come in and just say, well, I know there's a bunch of rules, I'm going to cut it, done.
Yeah, so it depends. Escape hatches can be crafted using whatever access control policy you like. And in some sense, we already use escape hatches in the real world. In contract law, there's the ability to appeal to a court, or there's the ability to annul a contract if the two parties to it agree to do so. Right? So
it's controlled escape hatches where everyone knows the rules to follow rather than to break. Also.
Yes, laying down the rules carefully, of course, is of paramount importance. Bob?
So yeah, quite a different answer, I guess, from me is really the what consensus are looking to do is to build a decentralized operating system for the world, and really to facilitate better interaction between individuals, and to basically take advantage of the opportunity that we have to to rebuild rebuild our business infrastructures from the bottom up using these new technologies. So I mean, in terms of specific things, it's whatever people need, essentially. So quite a broad answer, but really that's my key aim. I think is really to bridge these worlds between the crypto anarchist beginnings of Bitcoin and blockchain world and mainstream business needs, and to find a happy medium in between where these technologies can meet the aims of why these institutions were built and why we have regulations and so forth, but in a significantly more less frictionally way.
So let me ask kind of potentially a controversial question then. What if the problem is actually lack of programmability of existing solutions rather than decentralization or decentralization? Is that an avenue we would go down? Would we even question the orthodoxy of decentralization?
Well, I don't think anything is a utopian ideal, right? There is no silver bullet. We have, a new category of tool at our disposal, but, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not like everything in the whole world is going to end up on a single mega chain of doom. I think we're going to have a very hybrid world with lots of chains and interop and lots of non-blockchain pieces as well. And it's really about de-siloing to a degree that is rational.
Over to you, sir. What are you trying to drive then?
Yeah, I think, we are in a very different position when compared to the rest of the people on this one. We sit in between enterprise and then the providers, actually. The only thing which drives us is to make sure that who are embarks on it are successful. This is a fast-moving technology. We wanted to make sure that when we get in there, it does meets the enterprise requirements, actually. When I mean to say enterprise requirements, so because of having a blockchain-based application, the existing system is not going to be thrown out of the window for many, many years to come. So how are we going to make sure that, is it going to remain as one more box in the ecosystem, or is it going to completely revolutionize the way we are working? What is, in terms of scalability, has been the biggest problem, I would say, from a non-functional requirement basis. How do we kind of, operate in a diverse world? Like, let's say partner, I don't want to call it as the partner ecosystem or partner chains, right? So we're not going to be in isolation. So how are we going to, and then there's not going to be one chain that does everything, like Bob said. So how is that going to be, managed, right? So to communications between intra-chain communications or interchain communications. So all these things, I believe, having an EEA, setting a spec. So we're going to look it up as a standard. So applications, when they're built and they're fit enough to be called as enterprise ready, they're going to conform to some of the standards. So that's a big challenge, actually.
So some of the ingress and egress onto the blockchain, how do you do it in a trusted way, which kind of pretty much dovetails into what you guys are looking at.
Absolutely. So for example, if I build a system for trading application, so the standards or the entry criteria and exit criteria are something set at an application level. So how are we going to make sure that you kind of take those enterprise authentication mechanism to kind of take it towards the blockchain-built application, and also to ensure that the same thing is being adhered to, right? The regulator is going to look at that thing, right, in terms of the whole lineage of how, right from an access to a request to closing or post-trade kind of a thing. It's a big challenge which we'll be facing.
And there's a huge amount of infrastructure with X509 certificates, hardware, two-factor authentication, smart cards. So being able to kind of use that to assign, and of course with Serenity coming through, where you have the abstractions and allowing you to have different signature patterns apart from elliptic curve verification, there's a lot of opportunity to innovate in this space.
A lot of us are not talking about the energy that is required or the processing power that is required to solve that elliptic curve problem, right? So that's going to be even a bigger footprint on the universe in terms of energy.
Absolutely. So I know you guys are doing some amazing work with Poet and others. I'd love to kind of get your perspective on this.
Yeah, from Intel perspective, right, if you step back, we want all blockchains to run
Intel.
Yeah, on Intel, obviously. That goes without saying, but we want them to run the best on Intel. So from that perspective, knowing where the things are headed is very, very key. So that's one side of the thing. And so knowing the requirements for what we have to build, like, there's this talk about ZK snarks, homomorphic encryption, these emerging things. So these things require really, to be usable, they need lots of underlying hardware MIPS. So what is required for that? So understanding that kind of a thing. And then more in the near term, we do have some very interesting technologies that RE and people have been working on SGX and things like that, that we have on the clients and coming out in servers soon and things like that. So looking at those kinds of hardware rooted trust, how can that be applied to create a more scalable system, experiment with different kinds of consensus algorithms that don't require the power of Denmark to basically get to consensus. And then at the end of the day, the speed, because I think one of the themes today has been is like, how many transactions per second can we do? And we believe that hardware rooted trust has a role to play in that kind of a environment, given that it's a peer-to-peer kind of a network. So long story short, from Intel perspective, is like we just want this workload of blockchains to flourish and scale and speed up. Yeah.
And of course, with SGX, you now have potentially secure smart oracles, or at least you can attest to smart oracles.
So the thing is, like, it's like the way I talk about SGX is like more like it's a secure element. You get your own secure element. It's not like a single entity. You can have multiple of those, and you can apply them. It's very, very flexible in the sense, on one side you can have oracles on it. You can have wallets. We did some work last year, and you can run things like POET and things like that on the consensus, and then go down all the way to running smart contracts in them and things like that. And then you have the full, attestation of what is running in there and all of that stuff, and you have the proofs of all of that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the other thing which I think a lot of people don't talk about a little bit is we still got some tricky challenges around privacy and confidentiality in blockchain. But there's a whole range of use cases which are public attestations of records, like regulatory disclosures, fake news. Imagine if you could digitally sign news and guarantee the fact that somebody who's reading it can verify it against an authoritative source. Legal entity identifiers, ISIN issuance. There's a whole host of stuff that actually I think it's kind of boring because it's not changing the world, but it can certainly play very much to the G20 transparency, inclusion kind of place. And I think the technology is actually really ready for those. So I think that's something else we kind of need to be looking at and how to promote that.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, that's exactly the point. Point is, like, I think we believe like we're moving from the first inning to second innings of this thing, and now we need to basically scale it. Yep. Show the usefulness of the thing to the real world use cases, like talk about having to sign every article out there and being able to. Now we are really talking about I think overall, if you look at the volume, probably is more than even the e-commerce transactions. If you look at the number of articles from all over the world, from all.
Well, there are 500,000 LEIs, legal entity identifiers, that issue literally countless ISINs, which are unique identifiers for securities. All of that is actually really a digital identity problem, which blockchain, I think, has got a really interesting potential to solve. Turn an ISIN into a smart contract, and now you can actually have autonomous corporate actions, all that kind of good stuff. Good, okay, so Bob, I'm going to point at you. Now, disclosure, I'm on the board of EEA, so I've got a vested interest. I'm also kind of the chair for the technical working group. But you don't want to listen to me. So, Bob, all this talk, how are we going to turn it into something useful that people can actually take advantage of?
Well, I mean, the answer to that really is that, you know, the intention from the start with the EEA is, you know, that we are not going to dictate from top down how things work. The intention is really to foster a collaborative community where anyone who sees the need can form working groups on any topic that is, you know, of interest to them. And really, as our membership is growing so rapidly and in different areas, you know, those are really going to be quite emergent where those come from. We already have some existing working groups on particular topics or for particular client code bases. The identity working group was just recently started, and an awful lot of interest in that because it's kind of a key underpinning for a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. But also industry verticals starting to form as well. So I think you're really going to have this sort of pattern of, you know, a sort of a base layer of universal needs, which really is sort of, you know, kind of features, client features, you know, along these areas of scaling or confidentiality or whatever other pieces you have. And then on top of that, you're going to have these working groups looking within particular industries for building whatever pieces you need there. And yeah, really the intention is that stuff is going to emerge bottom up, and all of those are going to contribute into the standards. And, you know, the standards will be what people need there to be standards for to do their jobs, because that's, you know, that's your built-in incentive mechanism. You know, everyone has their businesses, and, you know, it's not like because you have the EEA, it's like, hey, stop doing anything, ask for permission. You know, yeah. Obviously not. People will do what they need for their businesses, and we just have this new forum for collaboration where there are common needs.
So a very strong mandate that we're not going to mandate. Okay, but
so I have one question for Bob. So can you speak to a little bit like is it financial focused only and things like that?
No.
Yeah.
No, I think it was just really of the initial membership, you know, obviously a strong element of financials. And I think that's really just come out of, because there's very, very immediate things that you can do within finance, you know, ludicrous numbers of different applications. And other industries, you know, maybe a little bit further down the line.
I would probably say anywhere where there is a need for some form of permissioning, realistically. If you look at majority of the things that you start looking at is kind of regulated industries where you need to know your counterparty, where you need to have guarantees on transactions. Because think about a very simple use case. Bitcoin, Ethereum, no miner is guaranteeing to include a transaction. It's a game theory play. But let's imagine you're in a hospital, you've got your leg cut off and you're bleeding everywhere. Now, what you don't want to be doing is hoping that one of the people decides to put that transaction in or not. You kind of need it guaranteed. So certain things beyond kind of normal kind of experimental scenarios, you need guarantees. And what is a guarantee? Well, you need to know the guy who's giving you the guarantee, because otherwise it's unenforceable. So pseudonymity doesn't quite work. So I think those are the scenarios there kind of that we should be looking at. The other thing is just to point out, you know, we're looking at not just necessarily technology per se, protocol there, but also starting up kind of creating test nets and sandbox nets and eventually kind of prod nets for EEA kind of setup. So we're covering a range of things that we're looking at. But borrowing very heavily from the from the Ethereum proposal process. The idea is people put in a proposal, there's a request, you specify kind of what the needs are, what are the requirements, you write the spec so then everybody else knows what to do. So for instance, Quorum's got private transactions. The way they implemented it is unique, but then how do you write an SDK on top of that? So by creating a specification, everyone's now clear about what they need to do in order to create a public specification, and then people are free to then implement the specifics as they choose to do so.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess another thing to say there is that there's obviously a mixture of tactical and strategic threads within the EEA. You know, so you see, for example, what's happening on Quorum. You know, that's fantastic. There you go. You know, got a code base. You can build things on it. But you know, that is one of multiple code bases. You know, there are multiple vendors building pieces, and you know, all of these things are going to come together. And I think, you know, you can't dictate standards in the absence of implementation either, right? You're going to have this feedback loop between them where, you know, people build things, some things work, some things don't. And you know, you find the good patterns, and those patterns are going to emerge as standards.
You say that plenty of people had a go at creating standards without implementation. Anyway, folks, we've got a few more minutes, so I'll open up for questions in case there are any in the audience. And if someone can help with a microphone. Thank you so much. Any questions? Please, I'll pay in Ether. No, I won't actually. It's too expensive. Oh, there's a gentleman in the front. Thank you. I'll pay you away, all right?
Actually, no one volunteered, so I thought I'd see if I could make one up by the time the microphone gets here, right? EAA is, you know, Bob, you were saying it's not really based around finance, right? It's kind of a broad industry and so on. But if you look at other organizations like R3 and so on, right, which are very much built around a particular market, I guess one thing I worry about is that if EAA is kind of all things to all people, maybe a little bit like Fabric, how will you really get traction? Did you not also need some level of market integration, that they need to build some kind of presence in a particular market or markets for this to actually start cascading and growing?
Because Ethereum's better as a technology?
No, it's, I mean, for what it's worth, kind of, I think there will be verticals, which are working groups specific, but I think we will get to a position where there's a lot of commonality, and we hope to achieve kind of both quality of individual specification, and at the same time, what we hope to do is get cohesion. So for instance, let's say we're seeing multiple different solutions have some commonality, then you refactor it out into separate modular specification. But I do think there will be naturally verticals kind of being represented by specific working groups.
And yeah, perhaps a slightly less flippant answer would be that you know, Ethereum has been going as a technology for, you know, a good 2 years, so well, more than that now. So you know, the pieces that we're looking at for, you know, basically these deltas for enterprise needs are not necessarily massive deltas. So I mean, I think that, you know, while there is going to be, you know, work at that, you know, the Ethereum client level, that's probably a lesser component of EEA as a whole than these, you know, these industry-specific pieces. I think, you know, if you look at the membership group within the EEA, you know, I think a lot of that work is going to be, okay, we've got nearly what we need, so what's the rest? You know, and building those pieces on top of that common base. You know, I don't think the generality of Ethereum is necessarily, you know, a negative thing in terms of lack of focus. You know, the platform was built to be general from the very start. That's always been an aim. And it's really just saying, okay, well, what do you need for these scalability or confidentiality pieces?
Now, folks, there's a really angry sign in the largest letters you can possibly imagine saying, time expired, please, and now. So on that note, I thank you very much for listening to us and to the panel.